Hello, my name is Amanda, and I want to welcome you to Mysore Melbourne, which is my yoga school where we teach Ashtanga yoga. Yoga is interpreted in widely different ways at this point in time. There's many different styles of yoga, many different ways of learning yoga, and even Ashtanga yoga itself is taught and understood in different ways. So I just want to take a little bit of time to talk to you about my understanding of Ashtanga yoga and how that works. And you'll get a chance to experience what it's like to be in my school during the week while you're here with us. So as I understand it, yoga is really about being at peace with life as it is. It's living a blissful life. This is entirely inner work. Yoga isn't about controlling external circumstances. It's more about getting to know a peace that already exists inside each and every one of us. So we're not looking for something that exists outside of us or that isn't already here in experience. Instead, we're learning to turn our attention inwards, away from all the repetitive thinking that always is going on, away from experience and towards our own heart and towards the peace in our own heart. The way that we do that in Ashtanga yoga is by practicing basically two things. Yeah? One of them is called Vinyasa, and more often than not, you're going to hear Vinyasa described as moving and breathing together. And that's absolutely right. That's what Vinyasa is. It's moving and breathing together. I interpret Vinyasa to be a great deal more than that as well. Practicing Vinyasa, even from that very first breath, is learning to attune to the cycle of life, which is encapsulated in a breath. Yeah? An inhale, you can take an inhale with me now if you want to, is a rising, stimulating, expansive energy. Yeah, so it's like, the sun rising or being born. It's an upward rising energy. And an exhale, we can exhale together now, is a settling, calming, receding energy. So you have the inhale, the rising energy, exhale, settling, calming energy. And this cycle of life, this cycle of energy is occurring within us and around us at all times. It's occurring in our breath. It's occurring in, again, the cycle of our own life. It's occurring in the seasons. It's occurring in the rising and the setting of the sun. And practicing Vinyasa is learning to move with this rising and falling energy rather than against it, or as is common in Western culture, we're really conditioned to favor and to appreciate the rising energy of achievement, of external focus, of accumulating wealth, or and there's nothing wrong with that, but there is another side of life, which is basically the exhale, the settling, the receding energy. So learning yoga, again, is learning to attune to this very natural cycle of energy that's occurring within us and around us at all times. And we do that by working with our breath to a large extent. But we also practice attunement. We practice attuning to the cycles of the moon, for example. Ashtanga yoga practitioners typically practice 6 days a week. However, we don't practice on full or new moon. And just a little bit more about the moons and this cycle of energy. Yeah, the dark moon, so the new moon, is like the bottom of the cycle, just before we start to inhale. And then we have this rising energy as the moon grows increasingly full. Yeah? And the full moon is the top of this cycle. It's the peak moment, this rising energy. And that's when like the emergency rooms are full of people and dogs are barking and the neighbors are having a party, usually at full moon. It's a peak energy time. We pause and rest at this time. Before then, the moon begins to wane, and we come all the way down again to the new moon, the dark moon, which is when people are typically really tired. There's less light in the world. It's a more quiet time. I've been practicing and teaching for years and years and years, and I've watched how often around the full moon the class is more full. Everybody's coming in, and new moon, usually a couple days around the new moon, it's a bit quieter, a few people sleeping in, not coming in so much. So it's really interesting to watch that. So I've been talking to you about Vinyasa and how practicing Vinyasa is learning to basically attune to life as it is, and to not be in resistance to that, to work with it rather than against it. So I'm talking about two things that we practice in Ashtanga Yoga, and I've taken a bit of time with Vinyasa, which is the first thing. The second thing is called Yoga Tristana, and Yoga Tristana is basically practicing attention. And I'm going to talk a little bit more deeply about how that works, but attention is a way of just boiled right down of strengthening the mind. And this is really important because I've been talking to you about yoga as a practice that's turning inwards into the peace in one's own heart. And for us to experience that, we need a strong mind, because the mind is really chatty. Anyone who has a mind knows that it's thinking all the time, right? It's going all the time. It's responding to stimulus, some of it external, some of it internal. And it always is trying to take attention. So through practicing attention intentionally, the mind can become stronger. So that we have, there's the possibility that we might be able to stay more focused and see more than just our own thoughts. Specifically, Yoga Tristana, attention. We practice attention to three things. The first thing is the asanas. These are the physical positions that we put the body in. And asanas are really important to practicing yoga. And in fact, if you've heard of yoga before, you've probably seen pictures of people doing asanas somewhere in the world. Asanas, we bend and twist the body, put the body in these different shapes. And in a way, practicing these asanas is actually assisting us in digestion. So this is physical digestion for sure. It's influencing our ability to digest food. And this is really important, because if you can't digest your food, what happens? It sits around, and it can become toxic and create disease. So having really good digestion is important for life and important for yoga, because if there's disease in the system, then the mind is going to be distracted, among other things. So, practicing asana is important to physical digestion, but also to emotional and mental digestion as well. When we're doing our practice, often we might find that, emotions and thoughts, they continue to arise. And this is a part of, digesting experience. And our experience is in our bodies. We hold our experience within us. And so moving, bending, twisting the body is really healthy for us. And it's a way of helping us, again, digest experience, our food, our thoughts, our emotions. Because if we can't digest, just like with the food, if we can't digest our emotions, if we can't digest our thoughts, they can hang around and become sort of toxic to us, acting like a cage that might hinder us in our lives, hinder our ability to know the peace that's within our hearts. So this is, again, just cycling back. I'm talking to you right now about practicing attention and the three things that we attend to. So I've talked about asanas, which are really important in terms of like digesting life and digesting experience. They largely work on the physical level, but they do work on other levels as well, as I've alluded to. The second place of attention, so we've got asanas. The second one is drishti. So drishti is practicing gazing in a particular direction. Each of the physical asanas that we put our body in has prescribed drishti, so it's a looking place. Yeah, and drishtis do have an energetic impact on our body, but just for the purpose of my discussion here, I want to boil it down to what I think is really important about drishti. Drishti is practicing mental steadiness. It's cultivating the ability to stay focused no matter what is going on. So we're putting the body in some position that may or may not be uncomfortable. We're keeping the eyes still. And we're not cutting off from the rest of experience. There's all sorts of things going on, and there always will be. Yeah, we don't need to cut off from experience. But what we can do is develop a capacity to stay focused whilst life goes on. Yeah, so it's really directly practicing mental steadiness. That's drishti. So again, I've been talking about yoga tristana, which is practicing attention. And we've talked about asanas, which for the most part are working on the body and more. We've talked about drishti now, which is really practicing mental steadiness and more. Yeah. The third place of attention, super important one, is breathing. We practice free breathing with sound. Yeah, you'll learn that while you're in the studio. But we're breathing in a way that is calming to the nervous system. And this is super important for a few different reasons, but let me just keep it really close to our practice. I'm going to give you an example. One of the things that you're going to learn early on is to hold your big toes, to bend over in a forward bend and hold your big toes. Now, for someone who is unaccustomed to working with the body, to hold the big toes is actually a pretty stressful circumstance to be in. So you might be standing here, holding onto the big toes, legs are shaking. Oh, it's hurting maybe back here. They may not be hurting for you. Maybe you're a ballerina or something, but let's just pretend like you've never really moved your body much. So I'm going to call that a stressful situation. So we practice arriving in that stressful situation, ideally daily. That's what we're going to do. Practice that asana every day. And while we're practicing that asana, we are going to keep our eyes focused in a particular direction. So in this case, it's going to be the nose, right? So we're practicing mental steadiness in a stressful situation. And we're adding the third piece, which is breathing in a way that is calming to the nervous system. So this is practicing Ashtanga yoga, these three things, with Vinyasa as well. If we keep doing this, the body, it may become more flexible. Possibly you might be able to easily hold your big toes. And really, ultimately, it doesn't matter if you're flexible or not. That's not the point. But what the point is that over time, your capacity to tolerate this stressful situation of holding your big toes is going to increase. Yeah? And that's practicing yoga. So you're learning to tolerate different circumstances. Yeah? In this case, a stressful circumstance. And to keep the mind steady while you're doing that. It's actually incredibly powerful work. I've been doing this for years myself and experiencing it personally, but also watching, many people developing a capacity basically to tolerate life. Because the thing is there's no avoiding being human, and there's no avoiding, if you're alive in human form, you can't avoid it, right? And being human does come with a certain amount of suffering. Being alive does, yeah. And practicing yoga in a way can help us to be at peace with that. And like I said in the beginning, there's a possibility of living a blissful life when we, are at home in the peace in our own hearts, no matter what's happening, even when the situation is difficult. So that's a little bit about how I understand Ashtanga yoga and how it works. If you have any questions for me, I hope that you'll come to me, let me know. This is, learning and understanding yoga is not something we do overnight or in one day. It's a long-term exploration and a process. In my shala, for the most part, what we're going to do is learn an embodied practice. So you're learning a physical practice, learning how to focus the mind appropriately, learning how to breathe appropriately. And then beyond that, really only about once a month we have a discussion about yoga. That's a good place to ask questions. And we as a community are slowly exploring and learning about yoga. And just as I am, I've been practicing for over 20 years now, and my understanding continues to evolve. It's a really beautiful thing, actually. So I hope you'll enjoy your week with us, and thank you for your presence. And let me know if you have any questions. Really looking forward to meeting you. Bye.